Stan Gibilisco here, proprietor and operator of amateur radio station W1GV, Whiskey 1 Good Vibrations. Another little ham radio story here for you, in particular a service department story. When I was head of the service department at Amateur Wholesale Electronics in Miami, Florida, a company that imported 2-meter radios from Japan. I made a video a little while ago about how we treated customers when we couldn't find the problem with their radio. People would send radios in to us, oftentimes COD. We usually accepted that. I think we always accepted that, but the point is that once in a while a person would report a particular type of problem with a radio which we came to call spurs in low power. Basically, in the low power mode, the radio seemed to emit spurious signals that went all up and down the entire 144 megahertz band. This was a 2-meter FM transceiver. It had two modes: high power, I believe about 25 watts output, and low power, about 5 watts output. I will not name the brand of the radio. I don't know if it even exists anymore. It's been 30 years, pretty close. But rarely did this problem occur. It rarely crossed our workbenches. Maybe 1 in 1,000 radios had this problem. But when a radio had this problem, we could not solve it. We knew what it was, but we could not solve it. We could not repair that radio. Whatever was causing the problem, we just couldn't figure it out. I did manage to change the frequency of the spurious emissions by varying specific components. It seemed to be amplitude modulating the entire signal, producing these spurs or spurious signals, which were like side bands up and down the band. I managed to get the spurs to spread themselves out more and more sparsely. We might say that the frequency of the modulation of the signal was made lower by fooling around with this particular component. And I thought, well, maybe if I just make this component big enough or remove it altogether, the problem will go away. But then we won't have the radio that it was as it was designed by the manufacturer. We'll have something that we did to it, and we won't know what other problems we might introduce. This is the second worst nightmare of a technician. The first one being when you can't find the problem. The second one being when you can and you can't solve it. I managed to lower the frequency of that modulation all the way down to 1 hertz. That's right, 1 hertz. And it still did it. There was no way I was ever going to be able to solve that problem, at least within a reasonable period of time. So we did with radios like that as we did when we couldn't find a problem. We replaced the customer's radio with a brand new radio, even if it was out of warranty, because it represented not only a defect in the radio, but a potentially dangerous defect in the sense that it could cause illegal emissions from the radio, and we couldn't solve it. We couldn't send him back that radio with the same problem in it. So, again, our policy, at least under my emperorship of the service department, was to replace the radio. We called that exchanging pardon me, exchanging the chassis. Meaning basically that we just swapped out the whole radio and made the customer happy every time. We turned something that we couldn't solve into a problem, or into, I should say, a solution that improved our reputation amongst radiomongers. Because you see, ham radio operators have quite a grapevine when it comes to the service departments of corporations that sell radios, particularly by mail. So that was how we solved that one, but I still don't have a clue as to what could have caused that. And the only way that we could have solved it would have been a shotgun approach to replace every single component in that radio one by one. And they were pretty complicated back then too, nothing like they are now, but there was a lot of components in that board in there, and to replace each one by one for one radio and 1,000 would have been a terrible waste of time. Just chuck the doggone thing and consider it something that's insoluble. There's something kind of fun about problems that are insoluble, because they remain a mystery forever. And mysteries are what the universe is made of. Did I make any sense at all? Well, if you were a customer of amateur wholesale electronics back then, I'm sure I made you mighty happy. Happy that you had a bad radio that we were willing to fix by any means necessary, including replacing it. Nobody ever said it's an inherently defective radio. They just said thank you and probably announced to 50 or 60 of their colleagues how wonderful and great we were. Could do worse. Stan Gibelisco signing off saying 73, which means best regards in ham radio jargon, and so long, which on 2 meters generally just means so long.